Welcome into another edition of Crunch Time here on ASTV Productions. I'm your host, Joe Hamilton, alongside my buddy, Scott Tobin. Scott, how you doing tonight, man?
I'm good, Joe. How are you, man?
I'm doing really good. It was a beautiful day in St. Louis. Got to go out, take a little bit of a ride, but I'm glad to be doing this with you. And a reminder, in our second segment, we will have Joe Roderick, part of Claves Online, on with us to talk a little Cardinal baseball, so stay tuned for that. But first, Scott, I got to ask you, you paid attention to the NFL season schedule reveal. What were your big takeaways from that?
I'm going to be completely honest with you, Joe. I haven't actually really had a chance to look at them yet. I've been really busy today. I know that Tom Brady's going to New England, which everybody's buzzing about. So that's going to be the centerpiece of football. All season. That's going to be the big hype. I know the season's starting on Thursday night with Tampa and Dallas to kick off the season. So that'll be a big ratings game to have the Cowboys to start the season playing the defending Super Bowl champions. That's going to be a big one. Those are the two big ones right off the top that everybody's kind of buzzing about. What really caught your eye as you looked at the schedule?
For me, it was that same game with Dallas and Tampa Bay. And it's not so much Tampa, because I understand the Super Bowl champions are always going to lead off that Thursday night at home. Well, not always, but usually that's the case. But why is Dallas everybody's darling still? They haven't been able to do anything in the playoffs, Scott. We've talked about Dak Prescott and his inabilities. Granted, he had a bad injury last year. Maybe he has a bounce-back year, but Dallas just doesn't – they're a big draw for the NFL. I get it, but why Dallas?
You just said it right there. Look at the TV ratings when the Cowboys are on TV every week. Why are the Cowboys almost every week Fox's 3:00 game of the week? Because when the Cowboys are on TV, it amounts to huge TV ratings, huge draws. They sell tons of merchandise. It's all that. It's all about money for the NFL. And whether you like the Cowboys or you like Jerry Jones, they make a ton of money for the league, so they're going to get those type games. Why do the Cowboys play every Thanksgiving? Because they get the best TV ratings.
And I mean, everybody wants to show, and it's usually a home game too. And any chance to show off Jerry Will, they're going to do it. Speaking of the Cowboys, what are you expecting out of them? I know it's too early. There could be other moves made, but just an early inkling, Scott, what can you expect from your Cowboys this year? Do you think it'll be another mediocre year, or do you think they actually make some noise?
I don't expect much. They did make some moves during the draft to bolster that defense a little bit. We have no idea what Dak Prescott's going to look like coming back from this surgery. Even when he has put up big numbers, it hasn't equated to wins. So I'm not expecting much. The NFC East is going to be a lot tougher this year than it was last year. So I think they're going to be in the hunt for a wild card spot, but I'm not really excited about the Cowboys.
When you say the NFC East is going to be tougher, is that necessarily a good thing, or are they still going to be a mediocre division that anybody can win? What do you mean by that?
Teams are going to be better. You're not going to see a team win that division with a losing record this year. The Giants made themselves a lot better in the draft and free agency. Washington improved themselves going and getting Ryan Fitzpatrick, and then they made moves to bolster that already really, really good defense. They're going to be better. Philly's going to be the wild card in this whole thing. What does Philly do? Is Jalen Hurts their quarterback? Do they make a trade and go get a different quarterback? There's still tons of rumors that they're one of the teams in the hunt for Deshaun Watson. So Philly's going to be a wild card. Washington and the Giants are both going to be better, and Dallas is going to be better. I expect Dallas to be 9-7, probably maybe 10-6. They're going to be right there. But the NFC as a whole is going to be a really tough division to make a really tough conference to make the playoffs. I mean, you look around the NFC. And you go down the south and you say, Tampa's probably in. Chances are New Orleans still going to get in. I know they've had a ton of turnover in New Orleans, but a Sean Payton-led team. Chances are New Orleans going to find a way to get in. I think Atlanta's going to be better. And you go out west, all of those teams are playoff potential when you look at Seattle, San Francisco, the Rams, and the Cardinals. And you go to the north. Minnesota made themselves better in the draft. The Bears, if Justin Fields is able to play it all there, with the defense they have, the Bears could be a contender. The Packers, who knows what's going to happen there. But, you've got a ton of teams. So it's not going to be easy to make the playoffs in the NFC this year.
Couple of things, excuse me, couple of things in that NFC North. The Packers went out and signed veteran quarterback Blake Bortles. Now, what this means for the Aaron Rodgers situation, I don't even know what this means coming out. Now, do you think this is just backup help, or do you think that Rodgers is on his way out and this is a corresponding move?
I think the Packers are covering their butts. It gives them a guy who has NFL experience, who's won in the NFL. If he has to be Aaron Rodgers' backup, or if they can't work things out with Rodgers, if he either sits out or gets traded, then you've got a guy who has been somewhat successful in the NFL. I know a lot of people don't get excited when you think about Blake Bortles, but you got to remember Blake Bortles got the Jaguars to the AFC Championship game about 3 years ago.
Yeah, it wasn't a great ending for Blake Bortles in Jacksonville. But then again, going into a different system in Green Bay, that could actually help a guy like Blake Bortles. Again, knowing he's a backup, but still, I feel a little bit more comfortable with Bortles in there than Tim Boyle right now as your backup, to be honest.
Well, yeah, absolutely. And then, if Aaron Rodgers isn't there, then you don't have to worry about Jordan Love jumping in and being your quarterback. You can throw Blake Bortles out there, and Bortles can play until Love is ready, whether that be this year or not till next year. But at least you have a guy, if something happens there that Rodgers for some reason is not there, or even if he is there and would end up getting hurt, at least now you have a guy that is at least a competent quarterback in the NFL.
Yeah, it would only help if they keep him, which I think they will. It'll only help Jordan Love too, because if Aaron Rodgers doesn't want to work for them, at least you have a quarterback that will work with him.
Right. Yeah. So I mean, it's just the Packers making sure that they're covered.
So on the other side of that rivalry, Bears and Packers, you talk about the defense there. You talk about Justin Fields can play, but you also got to realize they don't really only have one weapon there, and that's Allen Robinson. How much better can they really be?
Well, I mean, if you have a quarterback that can hit your receivers, hit your running backs, they can dunk the ball. Jimmy Graham's still there. Jimmy Graham had a halfway decent year in Chicago last year, so he can still be a weapon. And the Bears did draft a couple of young wide receivers in the draft. So, I mean, depending on how that all unfolds, and I really don't think Justin Fields will be the quarterback in week one. I think it'll either be Nick Foles or Andy Dalton, whichever one is still there when the season starts. Most likely Andy Dalton. But I don't think you want to throw Justin Fields right out there. I think you're going to slowly work Fields in. I think it'll probably be week 3 or week 4. If it was me anyway, that's the way I would handle that with Justin Fields.
Yeah, that's the way I would handle it too. I mean, handle him with kid gloves. You mentioned the two quarterbacks that could start week 1 for the Bears. Which one are you more comfortable with at this point?
Oh, I think it'll be Andy Dalton, because the Bears went out and got Andy Dalton in the offseason and pretty much told him that he was going to be the starter. So I think you'll see Nick Foles get moved before the start of training camp. I think somebody will go get Nick Foles and bring him in to be a backup, a security blanket for their team, whether it be a team that has a young quarterback. A team like Miami could be a possibility, since they don't really have a fallback for Tua, although we'll talk about that situation here in just a second. But yeah, I think Nick Foles will get moved and be somewhere else. So I think Andy Dalton more than likely is under center for the Bears in week 1.
Yeah, so I'd as a Packer fan, it's setting up great for me, because I know the Bears will not be great still, because if you have those two quarterbacks and you have a young quarterback in Justin Fields, it'll suck for me because I know the Packers are going into that stage where they could be the Chicago Bears come next year. At this point, I mean, the way things are looking.
Well, and you never know. I mean, we've seen young quarterbacks step out on the field and figure it out immediately. I mean, just because Andy Dalton starts week 1 doesn't mean that Justin Fields doesn't start in week 2 or week 3, have a really good feel, and then lead the Bears to the playoffs. I mean, that's totally possible as well. So, it's going to be really interesting. The whole situation in Green Bay, who knows what's going to happen there. Yeah, that's still really up in the air. It's going to be really interesting to see what happens. And then there's another quarterback situation starting to unfold, which, we thought would be the big quarterback discussion all offseason. And then with off the field issues, it really hasn't been. But it's looking more and more like the Deshaun Watson situation, his legal situation, is going to be settled potentially before the start of training camp. And there's starting to be buzz again about Deshaun Watson being moved. Peter King and a couple of people came out today and said that they truly believe that he will get moved before the start of training camp. And Peter King said he thought the Miami Dolphins were the top, most logical landing spot for Deshaun Watson. So that would be really interesting if after all of the turmoil that Deshaun went through with all of this legal stuff, and we still don't know for sure how this is all going to play out. But wouldn't that be crazy after all of this if Deshaun Watson in week 1 is the starting quarterback for the Miami Dolphins or the Philadelphia Eagles or the Denver Broncos, which seem to be the 3 teams everybody still keeps talking about?
Well, especially in Miami, Scott, if you do that, what do you do with Tua? Do you trade him?
I don't know. That would be really interesting to see. I'm sure there's some teams out there that would take a chance on Tua. Again, that situation's up in the air. He could be the starter in Miami in week 1. He could get moved. If he gets moved, I think it's going to be to a team that has a veteran quarterback or a team that has a quarterback that's going to be a free agent in a year or two that you bring in and have him be, kind of sitting there, be the heir apparent. What team that would be right off the top of my head, I don't know. It would be an interesting place potentially, although they just traded for a quarterback and they're stuck with that contract. A place like Detroit would be interesting. I know they just got Jared Goff, but then you would have competition for Goff if Goff doesn't play well. Maybe Tua takes that job. The Rams could possibly be a possibility, or Atlanta would be an interesting spot. Places like that, because Matt Stafford doesn't have a whole lot of years left in Atlanta, with the Rams. Same thing with Matt Ryan. He's got a couple of years left. So teams like that would be an interesting spot, a landing spot for Tua if he's not started in Miami and gets traded.
Before we go to break here, I got one more landing spot that's you haven't talked about yet. What about the New Orleans Saints? I don't
think so. I think New Orleans is pretty happy with Jameis Winston being their quarterback in the future. I think that's the game plan in New Orleans. So I don't really think so. I think that is their main plan in New Orleans.
All right. Well, we shall see. It's going to be a fun ride to opening weekend in the NFL. That's for sure. I think it said 100 days, Scott?
Somewhere around there. Opening day is the 8th or 9th of September, so we're not very far away. Training camp will be opening up the end of July, so we're getting there. It'll be here before we know it.
Yeah, that is for sure. Cannot wait to watch another season of football. So when we come back, again, Joe Roderick will be joining us to talk a little Cardinal baseball. So join us right after this here on Crunch Time. Welcome back to Crunch Time here on ASTV Productions. Joe Hamilton alongside Scott Tobin. And joining us now is Joe Roderick from Clave, involved with Claves Online. Joe, how are you, man?
I'm doing good, guys. How are you?
Good to see you, Joe. It's been a while.
Absolutely, for sure.
So let's start this conversation off with this series in Milwaukee, and the Cardinals are facing three tough pitchers. I mean, it is confirmed tomorrow that they will face Corbin Burns in that YouTube game. They're facing Brendan Woodruff tonight. What do you think of the Cardinals' offensive approach against these two pitchers in this series?
I mean, I think you're seeing all week long. You're going to see good pitching from both of these teams, the Brewers and the Padres, this weekend. It has just been so long since we've been able to associate the Milwaukee Brewers with a good pitching staff. You look at all the runs that they have seemed to have, all the playoff runs that they've had over the years, and usually it's the big boppers that they have in the lineup, whether it was the Ryan Braun and Prince Fielder era, you now with Christian Yelich. They've always been so offensive heavy. And when you look back at some of the top pitchers that they've had, I mean, what was it? A year of CC Sabathia. Kyle Loesch was their top starter for a while. They have really struggled to develop that top pitching in their organization over the years, but now it seems like they finally have something going. And that game tomorrow afternoon, it's interesting to me to see how good Corbin Burns is going to be coming off the COVID list. He says he was asymptomatic. He says he's ready to go. But I think we saw last year with the Cardinals and just a handful of Cardinals that weren't good when they came back from the COVID list. You talking about Carlos Martinez, Paul DeYoung, Lane Thomas, Austin Dean, all those guys that had it, and we don't know to what extent, we don't know how severe they had it, but they struggled to come back from it. If Burns says he's asymptomatic, the thing with him, he is going to strike out a lot of guys, which means he's going to throw a lot of pitches. If he hasn't thrown in a while, make him work those counts, get him out of that game early, because outside of those, the 7, 8, 9 guys, those three studs that the Brewers have at the end of their bullpen, everybody else is very hittable. You saw that last night with Boxberger. You get past the studs in that and you make them throw one of their other 3, 4 guys in that bullpen, they can be hit.
Joe, how impressed have you been? The Cardinals went into this series kind of knowing, at least in these first two games, that Milwaukee had the advantage with their starting pitching. And to see KK and Gant both, while they haven't been really dominant in these first two starts, both go out there and get into the sixth inning with shutout today in Gant's, should have been a shutout in Gant's fault if not for a little stumble by Harrison Bader. And then KK getting into the sixth inning with a shutout, then only giving up that one run and really stepping up in these two games.
Bob Ramsey and I talked about KK's performance this morning on Claves Online and our daily card show, and I was shocked. I was watching the game and didn't have the volume on at the time. I just turned it on around the time that KK was taken out, and to see when he was taken out, how early in the game he was taken out, I kind of looked at it, but then when I dove deeper and saw that he was already at 88 pitches, that's a lot of pitches to have thrown with, through 5 of the third. So, and you saw that again with Gant tonight. You saw the walks. You saw him get himself into trouble with the walks in the game tonight and the hit by pitches and just putting guys on for free. It's going to cause, it's been impressive. Both guys, the way that Gant has fought and the way that Gant has earned that spot in the rotation has been very impressive. KK pitching the way that he has also been very impressive, especially when you look at it. And when you go deeper into everything that KK has gone through in his 2-year career here in Major League Baseball over in the States, it's when you look at the fact that last year he went almost 10 months without seeing his family and pitching in front of no fans either, and then starting this year on the injured list, and then coming out and finally getting to pitch in front of fans at Busch Stadium for the first time and getting that reception, and just with the travel that he has endured and everything, how easy would it have been for him to just say, you know what, I'm going to stay over here. I'm not going to go back and just maybe have them release him or not honor the contract. But for him to come out and pitch the way he has, it's going to give the Cardinals a pretty big decision to make here in about 10 days from now when Miles Michaelis joins the team. And Miles Michaelis isn't going to the bullpen. He will not be coming out of the bullpen. He's going to be a starter. So do you put the longtime reliever, John Gant, back in the bullpen? Or do you put the guy that started for you last year as your closer in the bullpen and have another left-handed arm out of there while you don't know what's going to happen with Andrew Miller? But we also don't know the extent of Carlos Martinez's injury too. So these things always seem to have a way to work their way out, and kind of fix themselves. But as we look, 7-10 days down the road, it's fun to kind of play with all of this and kind of figure out what direction the Cardinals are going to head.
It's funny you say that, because John Gant, to me, profiles more as a relief pitcher because I just don't think he has the stamina to be a starting pitcher, if that makes sense. He wastes too many pitches, it seems. Like, you see counts tonight. There were pitches by Gant tonight that were way over Molina's head. I mean,
I don't know if that's stamina. I mean, but the stamina thing, though, he still is throwing a lot of pitches. And that's the thing. It's not so much the stamina. It's figuring out how to be a starting pitcher and how not to waste. I mean, the walks have killed him in some of these starts. He's been a magician to get out of a lot of the issues that he puts on himself. It's not, he's not throwing good pitches and getting hit. The defense isn't making errors behind him. He's putting guys on for free. And if you go and you look at his starts and the pitches that he's thrown, he's built up the arm strength to be a starting pitcher. He's gone deep into games. It's not the stamina. It's more of the control that he needs to figure out. And maybe, I think for him to say that he wanted to be a starter going into spring training, saying he wanted to be a starter, for the opportunity to present itself the way it did with injuries to Michaelis and KK, and knowing that Hudson was not going to be involved in the rotation at all too. I mean, the opportunity was there. John Gant saw it and he attacked it, and he is there now. I mean, through the middle of May, has not lost it. Ponce de Leon lost his spot in the rotation because of performance. John Gant didn't. I think it's more of slowly just figuring out how to stay a starting pitcher and how to not go to those, as you meant, the deep counts. Not, when you're going 7-8 pitches on a batter, you're gonna start to tally up those numbers real fast. When you're at the fifth inning tonight, he struck out the side. That's great. That shows that he has control. That's also a double-digit pitch inning. It's also, you're also getting up there into 15, maybe close to 20 pitches. I didn't see how many pitches he threw in that fifth inning, but you're still getting up there with the pitches. And if he wants to be a starter that goes 7 innings a night, 8 innings a night, the walks have to be gone. That you have got to eliminate those almost completely.
Scott, what about you?
No, I totally agree. Like Joe said, he's been a magician. The fact that the walks haven't come back to hurt him more than they have for the most part this year. In my mind, Joe, I know it's still really early, but you look at this ball club. I think as we start, everybody thought, oh, we might need to go get a bat at the trade line. Are you kind of the same mind as I am that if this team right now, if it was trade deadline time, a starting pitcher may be the biggest need for this ball club?
I'm so torn on where to go. It's, if you're going to get a starting pitcher, it has to be a top of the rotation guy. I mean, you're talking Max Scherzer. That's who you're talking about. If you're talking about going out there and getting a starting pitcher, you don't need a fourth or fifth starter. In years past, when they've gone out and they've gotten starting pitchers, it's been okay. A guy to get us through August and September. They don't need that. They have the depth in their organization to bring those guys up and do that. If you want somebody, it's somebody that's going to start game 2 or 3 for you in the playoffs. And that name right now is Max Scherzer. As far as the bats go, I keep going back and forth on it. I do. And I think at the beginning, you looked at the beginning of April, it would have been great to have a left-handed outfield bat. to mix into that with everything. But Harrison Bader's been hitting since he's come off the injured list. Tyler O'Neill back-to-back games with home runs. He has a handful of home runs since he's been come back too. So you see the power is there in the outfield, and Dylan Carlson's going to win NL Rookie of the Year. You have outfield bats. I wonder if you go out and you find somebody, if you find a left-handed bat somewhere, an outfield, left field bat, or a left-handed bat in the outfield that's going to work into that rotation and give you another left-handed bat in that lineup, which they struggle to have right now.
Yeah, you talk about the left-handed outfield bat. I'd almost want to go to Baltimore and say, what's it going to take to get Trey Mancini at this point?
The one name that I had looked at was Rosario in Cleveland. That was the guy that I had my eye on as I looked around around baseball to see which teams are going to be out of it, and then on top of that, you have to look at what contracts, what they look like too. And I think Rosario he's making $8 million this year. So when you look at what that would be after the trade deadline, it's nothing after that. I mean, it's what, $3 million that you're having to pay a guy like that. So I think you have to factor in a lot of different things, and you kind of have to look too at the history of John Mozeliak and what kind of trades he's going to make. There's no left-handed bat out there that you're going to re-sign for years and years to come. So it has to be a one-time rental, and it has to check all of those boxes.
Talking about bats and adding somebody, I know he's not left-handed, but we have to bring him up because everybody in St. Louis is talking about him. If the opportunity comes up, are you interested at all in bringing Albert back to St. Louis?
If it's the month of September and you're doing it just to give him a farewell, the proper farewell, then I'm okay with that. I would be fine with that. The one thing that when I look at the Albert Pujols situation that I'm happy with right now in the Cardinal organization is that Paul Goldschmidt's at first base, that he is your first baseman, and bringing Albert in is not going to cause any kind of riff from fans, from front office going, God, we got to figure out a way to get Albert Pujols some at bats. You're not doing that over Paul Goldschmidt. He is not starting any games over Paul Goldschmidt. So in years past, when it was like Carpenter as the first baseman or Jed Jerko as the first baseman, when you could have looked at that and go, you know what? Hey, Albert once was better than this guy. No, like Paul Goldschmidt is the gold standard in baseball when it comes to first baseman. So you don't have to worry about, if you were to bring him in for any reason, you don't have to worry about your first baseman looking over his shoulder because he knows where his spot is on the team. But it doesn't work. There's no reason to bring him in. It would make for a great ending to his career, but it doesn't make sense right now. It just doesn't. And looking around baseball, I don't know where it does. And that sucks. It really, really sucks because you're talking about one of the greatest right-handed hitters of all time that's sitting out there right now as a free agent with nowhere to go, and possibly nobody wants him.
It's sad to think about, that is for sure. I think he'll find a job somewhere. I mean, I know
he has to.
Yeah, I know there are certain spots. I mean, the one that comes to mind for me has to be Chicago with Tony La Russa. On the south side, but
that's another one too. It's they have Mercedes and they have Abreu right now. They don't have that need, and that makes it really does. Like relationship wise, it makes as much sense as it would in St. Louis. It would. You reunite him with Tony La Russa, and you have you give him that last year with the manager that he won 2 World Series with, and it makes for a great story. But you have the reigning MVP, and then you have a young player in the American League. I don't know if he's a rookie, if he has rookie eligibility, if he does, but for the start that he was on, do you really want a young guy like that looking over his shoulder thinking an offer is going to cost him, a spot the next day? You're not going to do it. But if Mercedes could play anywhere in the field, then maybe you go, okay, maybe we'll try him out in left or right, and we could bring Albert in because they have injuries to the outfield. I mean, losing Jimenez and Robert, they have openings. Albert doesn't fit there though. He just doesn't. I mean, he needs to go somewhere where he could play first base or DH, and a team that has one of those options there for him.
Quickly, where is that, if anywhere?
I haven't, and we've talked about this, and I haven't looked at their organization enough, but I saw the Vegas odds outside of St. Louis and Chicago. The Vegas odds said Toronto, or I guess the Blue Jays, Buffalo, wherever they're calling home for right now. I saw the Blue Jays were the top list. I don't know who their first baseman or their DH is, so I couldn't tell you. That's just what I saw as the odds.
That would be an interesting landing spot for sure. Scott, you got anything to add before we go to break?
Yeah, it's just going to be really interesting. I still think Kansas City might eventually be a spot where Albert ends up just because of his relationship with Matheny and that being a young ball club. I can see him going in there and getting some time at DH and first base and kind of being a mentor to some of those young guys in Kansas City.
Yeah, I mean, that's where he's from, so it would, it's another one that makes sense as we sit here and talk, but as far as the organization goes, I don't know if it makes sense. It's so hard to handicap right now.
It really is. Joe, thank you for coming on once again. Our annual Wednesday guest. Thank you, and let's do it again next week, man.
Absolutely, guys. Thank you.
Thanks, Joe.
That was Joe Roderick, and we'll be right back talking some Blues hockey right after this here on Crunch Time.
Hey Crunch Time fans, my name is Graham Forsyth. I'm the host of Coffee with Graham and the Prospect Show on ASTV Productions. On Coffee with Graham, I talk to athletes, coaches, and whoever else involved in the amateur sports scene in Manitoba and Saskatchewan. And on the Prospect Show, I talk to the best young hockey prospects from around North America. You can catch all the coverage on ASTV Productions. You can catch Coffee with Graham on Tuesdays and Thursdays at 10:30 a.m. Central Time. And for the Prospect Show, that show airs every Friday at 8 p.m. Central Time. Hope to see you there. Have a good one.
As always, it's nice to talk to Joe Roderick every Wednesday talking some Cardinal baseball. You get a lot of insight talking to him, don't you?
You do. Well, I mean, he's around a lot of guys that he can get a lot of insight from, working with Claves and Rammer and all the different guys that he does stuff with through Claves Online, which everybody should go check them out too. They do a great job. And, Joe and Claves have been really good to us and been more than willing to come on the show multiple times. So thanks to everybody over at Claves Online. And before we jump into the hockey, Joe, real quick update on the Cardinals. Tyler O'Neill hit a home run to tie it 1-1 in the eighth. In the bottom of the eighth, Ryan Helsley had a rough outing, gave up 3 runs in the bottom of the eighth. So the Brewers are leading 4-1. Josh Hader's on the mound in the top of the ninth.
I hate to, talk baseball in a hockey segment, but real quick, I was asking the same question today, Scott. Do you bring Ryan Helsley in after 12 to 15 pitches yesterday? Would you have brought him in today?
You almost had to because you had Reyes and Gio pretty much hands off today. And then when you get past Cabrera, I mean, honestly, Whitley threw 14 or 15 pitches last night too. When you get past that, who else do you really count on in this bullpen? I mean, I get nervous every time Tyler Webb comes into a ball game. So I don't know that they really had a whole lot of other options there besides Ryan Helsley at that point.
Yeah, there weren't many other options. And you knew one of these two games. It was tough when you were facing Woodruff and Burns back to back. Hopefully, if they don't come back in this game, they can get to Burns tomorrow. And like Joe said, it's going to be interesting to see how he pitches coming back from the COVID list. So, moving on to Blues hockey here, and we are now counting tomorrow. We have 2 more games until the start of the Stanley Cup playoffs. And we're getting a Minnesota Wild team in here today and tomorrow that are still playing for something. They can catch Colorado or Vegas for that matter. The Blues still don't know who's in that top spot. So you're getting a very hungry Minnesota team. Is that a good thing for the Blues or a bad thing for the Blues heading into the playoffs?
Well, the Blues have to match that intensity going into this series. I mean, that's the whole thing. You know Minnesota's going to come in with something to play for. The Blues have to, even though the Blues don't really have a whole lot to play for going into these last couple of games, you've got to come out and play tough and make it tough on Minnesota because you want it. If you can beat them and keep them from getting where they want to be seated, that's a moral victory for yourself. You always want to be the team that kind of spoils something for the opponent. So hopefully the Blues can come out with the same kind of intensity and match the intensity that Minnesota has, and hopefully we can screw up their seeding plans as we roll into the playoffs.
Are we shocked that Billy Husso got the start in this game and not tomorrow's game?
I mean, you knew he was going to get a start in one of these games. So I mean, it really doesn't matter. I mean, do you start Bennington in the first one and hope that you win the first one and be up 1-0 in that series, and then whatever Husso does, it's if you lose, then you go 1-1 in these two games. Or the other way of looking at it is you start Husso tonight, you hope you steal a win, and then if you would happen to lose, you have Bennington trying to even up these two games in the second one. So there's two completely different ways you can look at it, but I mean, you knew they were both going to play one way or the other.
Yeah, and you saying that Blues stealing a win, well, they're up 4-0 on the Minnesota Wild at this point, and Billy Husso has looked really good in this game. He made, at least what I saw the first period, he made some absolutely had to make saves, and they were very timely. That's something you need. That's something the Blues really haven't gotten out of Jordan Binnington. I find it interesting, Scott, that Jordan Binnington has not had a shutout this season.
Yeah, I mean, that's a stat that you would like to see him have some shutouts. There's no question that Jordan Binnington wasn't the Binnington of 2019, which, we've said for a long time we may never see that Jordan Binnington again. For the most part this year, he was pretty solid. Yeah, there were games where he let in goals here and there where you're like, man, that was a soft goal. But overall, Jordan Binnington's played pretty well this year for the most part.
Klim Kostin got his first start tonight, and first start in the NHL this season. Klim Kostin, is he a player for the Blues in the playoffs, you think, or do you think they sit him? I think he's going to be a very big piece in the playoffs.
I think he's going to be a really big piece. I'm not 100% sure. You got to realize that, he just got into the United States, yesterday? This was his first game. I think he's going to get some minutes. I think because of the fact that, because of being a big body and kind of a truck on the ice in a lot of ways, I think he will get some minutes and he could play a big part, but I don't know that he's going to be like somebody that you're going to get through a series and go, oh man, the Blues won that series because of Klim Kostin. I mean, he can definitely help, and he's definitely something. I think he's definitely going to get some minutes, but I don't know how big of an impact he'll be.
The Blues will be competitive in whatever first-round series they have if, and you finish that sentence.
I lost you for a second. The Blues will be competitive.
So the Blues will be competitive in a first-round playoff series, no matter if it's Vegas or Colorado, if this happens. What is it?
Jordan Binnington play well. Their goalies play well. Binnington and Husso play well. If their defense plays decent, they just have to play good, smart team hockey, man. You can't get a lead and then blow a 3-1 lead in any of these games. They just have to play really good, smart hockey. That would be my biggest key is just play really good, solid, fundamental hockey.
Yeah, that's Blues. They need to play Blues hockey. If they can play Blues hockey, they can wear down teams like Vegas. They can wear down teams like Colorado, teams with more skill. I know I've heard speed and skill kill in today's game, but if you can wear those teams down and show out with your speed and skill, because the Blues have a couple guys, and one of those guys, in my mind, is a big key is Jaden Schwartz. If that guy's going, watch out.
Yeah. I mean, you're right. That would be big for them. And again, the team's just got to play well. That'll be the key because, they have the talent. Definitely. They definitely have the talent to compete in any of those series. It's just playing really well, playing smart hockey, and not having turnovers on your own end, being able to clear the puck, just little things that we've seen them not be able to do for long stretches during the season this year.
Vladimir Tarasenko is being held out probably until tomorrow. I'm sure he'll get a game in tomorrow. And what is Vladimir Tarasenko at this point?
No idea, to be totally honest with you. I have no idea what Vladimir Tarasenko is. We haven't seen a ton from him since he came back from his injury. He's scored some goals. Is he now a net front presence that you're going to try and do that with him and try to get him to score dirty goals that way? Is he still the sniper that he used to be? I just really don't know. And, as we've seen from time to time, Tarasenko has a tendency to have stretches of games where he's not really in the game. So is he going to come out and play good competitive hockey if he's not doing exactly what he wants on the ice? I'm just not sure what to think about Vladimir Tarasenko at this point.
I'm not quite sure what to think of him either. The other two guys I worry about in terms of what their playoff production is going to be. We've seen a lot out of Mike Hoffman lately, and he seems to work good with Tyler Bozak. Do you think that could be another, or not Tyler Bozak, Robert Thomas? Do you think the Thomas-Bozak duo from 2 years ago could the Hoffman and Thomas be the Thomas and Bozak from 2 years ago, is what I'm trying to say.
I think they have a chance to be better than that just because Hoffman's more of a pure scorer. And that works well for Robert Thomas because we know that one of the things that, people like to criticize him for is not shooting the puck a whole lot. So, his ability to work the puck, to get it to Hoffman, get him in good spots, that duo could be really big in the playoffs, especially the way we've seen Mike Hoffman play down the stretch.
I've often heard Mike Hoffman's name, and I've heard the same thing. You got to use him right. You got to use him right. The Blues aren't always going to be on a power play. So how are the Blues able to use him right 5-on-5? What are those areas he needs to be in?
When you say use him right, you want to have him on the ice on the first line and shift on the power play, which they didn't do part of the season. And then on 5-on-5, you just have to play and get him the puck when he's in a position to take good shots. Basically, make sure he's on the side that he wants to be, and just kind of work the game so that Mike Hoffman's comfortable. Because we've seen how dangerous he can be when he's feeling good on the ice.
On the back end, before we go to break, there's one guy that I cannot wait to see in the playoffs because I think he's fully healthy, and that's Colton Parayko. I've seen a different Colton Parayko lately. I don't know if you have. What have you seen out of Colton?
I think he's healthier. Is he 100% healthy? I'm not sure about that, but I think he's definitely healthier. Sorry if I laugh while I'm doing this. I just watched Nolan Arenado swing so hard fouling a ball back that he fell down off of Josh Hader. So that was kind of irritating. The catcher went out to the mound to give him a second to compose himself. But yeah, no, I think what you've seen is Colton Parayko starting to feel more like himself. He's starting to feel healthier, feel more comfortable out on the ice, and that's huge for the Blues. They've really missed that most of the season.
They really have, and you need guys like Torrey Krug and others to play up, and I'm sure all of them will get games in tomorrow. They were out tonight due to injury, but I'm sure getting this team healthy, it'll be a fun ride. At least I hope so. If they win 2 games in a series against a top team like Colorado or a top team like Vegas, I call that a win, and that's all there is to it. I'm not saying they'll lose this series by any means because they have the talent, but what we've seen this year hasn't been great. Hopefully that doesn't transition over. Coming up next year on Crunch Time, we will be talking some NBA basketball and talk about some teams that won't make the playoffs. I kind of want to put Scott on the spot and what some teams should do going forward. So come back for that right after this here on Crunch Time. Welcome back to Crunch Time here on ASTV Productions. Joe Hamilton alongside.
Joe, sorry. I'm going to cut you off real quick before we jump into the NBA. Real quick, Cardinal update again. Top of the ninth inning, Josh Hader on the mound. Cardinals have the tying runs on first and second with one out. Paul Goldschmidt got a double. Nolan Arenado walked. Unfortunately, due to an injury to Paul DeYoung, Edmundo Sosa is the guy at the plate representing the tying run right now, but you do have Yadi on deck. So I may break in a couple of times with some quick updates as we go through this segment, just letting everybody know.
Hey, that's fine, Scott. And I'm glad you did that because, hell, everyone wants to hear what the Cardinals are doing. But, Scott, I want to start first with the the Houston Rockets. Losing James Harden, they're going into a deep rebuild. What is that number one thing that they need to accomplish?
Well, I mean, they've just got to rebuild the team, like you said. They moved on from Harden. That's a bad ball club. That was a team that was trying to win now. We saw them go out and bring in guys like Chris Paul in the last couple of years. Russell Westbrook, James Harden, it just didn't work. So that team's going to have to draft and be smart in free agency. And it's going to take a couple of years for Houston to be back in any real hunt for playoff positioning.
Right. But what identity is Houston? Are they in a do they have to learn a new identity, or are they just going to stay the same, you think?
Well, no, I mean, they're going to it's way too hard to say that because, like I said, they're going to have to go out and see what they can do in free agency and then see where they're at when the draft comes and see what they can pick up. And, so to say what their identity is going to be, they don't really have an identity right now. Their identity right now is a really bad basketball team. They lost 21 in a row at one point. They need a whole new identity. They need new players. They need a whole new system. It's going to be a while in Houston.
If you were estimating, Scott, how long would that Houston rebuild be? We talk about between 3 and 5 years, but that one could take a little longer in my mind.
I mean, again, it's all going to come down to what you're able to accomplish. If they're able to go out, if you're able to go out and get a couple of really good free agents to come in there right away and you get a decent draft pick, then you can speed that process up. But again, that's a lot of question marks that right now we can't answer, what they do or how long it takes.
All right. So staying in the Western Conference, you have I'm going to go Oklahoma City because at one time this team was a perennial, playoff run team. Now they're just stuck in limbo. What do they need to do next?
Same type of thing. You're talking about a team that at one point in time had James Harden, Kevin Durant, Russell Westbrook. That's been almost a decade ago now since the three of them were there. And then since then it's been, here, let's move this guy in. Let's try this guy. Let's do this. They kept trying to bring in guys to play with Russ when he was there. They brought Paul in for a couple of years to try to make that work. It didn't work. Then they went out and tried to, when I say Paul, I mean Paul George. Then they tried to go get Chris Paul. None of that worked. They just need to go out and go young and try to rebuild. Again, it's going to be a while in Oklahoma City before they're really good again because, they don't have a whole lot of building blocks right there right now. Real quick upset the Brewers. Real quick update. The Brewers did beat the Cardinals 4-1.
And you saw that coming, especially with Sosa at the plate. Nothing against Edmundo Sosa. I wish he'd get that offensive aspect of his game like a little bit better. I don't know, Scott. Do you think Edmundo Sosa is a hitter at this point at all? You think he'll ever turn into a hitter at this point?
I mean, he's never going to be, that he's a bench player, utility middle infielder. Those guys a lot of times are career 230, 240 slap type hitters, and that's probably what Edmundo Sosa is going to amount to. I mean, not trying to be mean, but no, I don't think he's ever going to have much of an offensive game.
All right, so going next to the Sacramento Kings, they're not as much of a dumpster fire as they used to be. Is this team maybe starting to jump a little bit?
Yeah, I mean they've drafted well the last couple of years. They're still a ways away from really being super competitive, and it's been a long time since the Kings were really good. But yeah, they're starting to show some signs. Again, I think it's going to be a couple of years before they're in the upper echelon of the West or have a potential to be. But they're definitely starting to trend in the right direction after years of just kind of being in neutral, basically.
Yeah, and it didn't seem like they were moving. It was bad for a while in Sacramento, and I remember watching a few videos and people making fun of them. It wasn't pretty. One more team in the West here. You have the Minnesota Timberwolves. I thought this team was in for a bright future. Turns out I was wrong. Or is this just a bad season?
No, they're making strides. Minnesota is one of those teams that in the next couple of years they add a couple of more pieces. They're heading the right direction. Karl Anthony Towns is kind of the face of that team right now. They've got a couple of other pieces that look good. Minnesota is going to be one of those teams in the next 2 or 3 years that really takes a step forward and could be a force in the West. So keep your eye on the Timberwolves.
Yeah, I like Karl Anthony Towns. I hope he does well. So let's move over to the East. And I'm starting with the NBA champion from 2 years ago, the Toronto Raptors. How they have fallen, what a difference 2 years makes. What is Toronto's biggest problem?
Well, they lost their superstar last year. And some of the other guys on that team are starting to get a little older. Serge Ibaka's been around for a long time now. We talked about just a few minutes ago about Oklahoma City a decade ago when they were really good. Ibaka was part of those teams. So, he's been in the league 12 or 13 years. He started to slow down. Kyle Lowry, a couple of those guys are getting older. So, again, a youth movement in Toronto is probably where they're headed next. And, they had an 8-year run where they were in the postseason. They won a championship. So, now it's time to kind of rebuild and restock and give it a couple of years, and they'll probably be moving back up the ranks of the East again.
The Orlando Magic, I thought, had a little bit of, no pun intended, magic coming up in their future. And again, I think I was sorely mistaken on that. They're 21-48 as of right now, and things aren't looking good in Orlando. Hopefully their future's bright, right?
It's not. Look at what Orlando did at the trade deadline. They traded their 2 best young players. They traded their young center to the Bulls. They traded their other best guard, the young player, to Denver. So, no, Orlando, I have no idea what the Magic are doing. But, no, the future does not look bright in Orlando in the foreseeable future.
Now I want to talk about a couple of teams that are on the cusp. And I don't think this team gets in even to the play-in tournament. But what the Chicago Bulls have done, you just talked about, Orlando trading their center to Toronto or to Chicago. The Chicago Bulls look like they're going to be a force to be reckoned with too coming up.
I like what the Bulls are doing. I think they still need another piece or two. They could use another scorer to add with what they've got, and then a couple of those role type players, whether that's through the draft or they get those guys in free agency. But yeah, I think the Bulls in the next couple of years are going to be a team to reckon with in the East, and that's going to be nice because it's been about a decade. Derrick Rose looked like he was going to be the next coming of something really great in Chicago and had the Bulls on the cusp of going to the Eastern Conference Finals a couple of times. And then, unfortunately, Derrick's body just wouldn't hold up for him. I mean, he's still playing and has had a good career. But if Derrick Rose would have been able to physically stay healthy, he would be one of those guys up there with LeBron and those guys that we talk about as one of the greatest players in the league right now.
Yeah, Derrick Rose is definitely the what could have been story. And it's baffling, isn't it, Scott? I mean, is it the fact that he's stupid with his health, or is it just bad luck?
No, nothing that he did. Sometimes your body just doesn't hold up. And I mean, Derrick Rose was a tenacious player, offensively and defensively, and his knees and ankles just didn't hold up. And sometimes that happens to guys. He's had a bunch of surgeries, a bunch of freak injuries. A couple of times because he tried to push and get back sooner. In playoff runs to help that team get over the top. And No, Derrick Rose, a very hard worker, very good guy, just didn't have any luck. It's really a shame because he was an electric player when he was in his prime and healthy.
Yeah, but I'm glad Chicago's on the up and up now. That is for sure. Now, I kind of want to go on to the playoff side, well, at least the play-in side, and talk about one team in the East, and that has to be the New York Knicks. I mean, this team, for a while there, like Sacramento, was a team in limbo. Now, it seems they have a bright future and could make some noise in the postseason.
Yeah, I would say they were more than a team in limbo. That might have been the worst run sports team in all of professional sports for almost a decade. They probably, other than Stan Kroenke, James Dolan may be the worst owner in professional sports. But despite that, they've actually started to turn things around finally. And they're gonna, whether they can make a real deep run in the postseason this year, I'm not sure. But to actually be able to talk about the Knicks in a positive light, because I mean that is one of the legendary franchises in the NBA, and the NBA is better when the Knicks are good.
Yeah, the NBA is better when the Knicks are good. You are exactly right there, because I mean New York, having a good team in New York in any sport, you're going to get talked about. I mean, the Yankees are starting to play better. The Knicks are finally getting good. Now you have the Brooklyn Nets. I mean, that could be a sports hotbed. I mean, again, New York, has it always been a sports hotbed in your mind, Scott?
Yeah, I mean, the Yankees are, the Yankees again, one of those iconic franchises. You talk about the iconic franchises in sports. Baseball, you think the Yankees. You think basketball, you think the Knicks. You think hockey, you think about the Rangers. I mean, those are just teams that immediately pop into your mind. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot of tradition, a lot of legacy, a lot of legends have come out of New York. So yeah, it's always one of the premier thing. It's one of those premier cities where when those teams are good, any of those sports are better because of it.
Yeah, at one of the biggest markets in the U.S. It's nice to have a good team there. And also, Scott, it's kind of nice to have a bad team there. Then you get to hear some of the real gems of sports talk. That's for sure. I'm sure you've heard your fair share of those, right?
Well, I mean, that happens even when they're good. I mean, the New York media is never happy. So even when those teams are good, they're going to find a reason to complain and dig into something and find something to talk about. So yeah, good or bad, the New York media is going to find something to light up the airwaves with.
Scott, do you got anything before we get going tonight?
Before we get going, are we just now starting?
I know, right?
Before we leave?
No, I mean before we leave.
I knew what you meant. I just had to give you a hard time. Good show tonight, man. We want to thank Joe Roderick again for coming on with us tonight, and it'll be interesting tomorrow to see how that Cardinal game fares out. Of course, we can't watch it because it's on. Well, you can watch it if you have YouTube TV, but
it's not YouTube TV. It's just on the MLB YouTube channel.
Yeah, I don't like it.
I don't either. I mean, but I'm still gonna watch because I'm a Cardinal fan.
I know, but there's a lot of people that don't have access to that. So there's a lot of people that aren't going to be able to watch.
Will you be able to watch?
I will be busy, so I'll be listening. I'll have it on in my car because I'll be working and doing stuff. So I'll actually have to listen tomorrow.
You got a high school baseball game tomorrow, right?
Tomorrow night.
Who do you have?
Tomorrow night I have Borgia and Lutheran North.
What can we expect out of that, Scott? Who's a good team in this, and are they both good?
They're both pretty good ball clubs. We're starting to roll towards the end of high school baseball season. We'll start talking about baseball districts and state playoffs here in the next couple of weeks as the high school baseball season starts to wind down, and then we start to look at American Legion and club teams and stuff as we roll into the summer months for high school athletes.
Well, it's high school sports. High school baseball is going to be fun going into districts. That is for sure. And yes, Scott, great show. Thank you to Joe Roderick for coming on. And for Scott Tobin, I'm Joe Hamilton. Be good to one another. We will not come to you tomorrow night schedule differences. So until the next time we see you, have a good one, guys.